Welcome to the Tales of the Jedi review. I'm your host, Pranav Sriraman, joined by my co-host, Shyam Punnachalil. Shyam, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How about you?
I'm doing excellent, actually. This new series just released. Very short time ago. It was a quick, short series. But it was an exciting one. It was an exciting watch, and I can't wait to get into all of it. But before we do, guys, make sure to subscribe to the MHS News Productions YouTube channel for the best digital content available. But with that being said, Sean, let's get right into it. So, starting off, episode one, we see Ahsoka's childhood almost. We see her as a baby interact with the Force. I just wanted to know what your whole thoughts were on the Ahsoka arc. We saw her as a baby, and then we saw her in the developmental stages training with Anakin, and then we saw her as a full-grown Force user, not a Jedi, a Force user. I wanted to know what your whole thoughts were on the Ahsoka development.
Yeah, I think with the Ahsoka development, like most of the series of Tales of the Jedi, or for quite frankly all of it, it's really just kind of filling in gaps that we didn't really get through the Clone Wars series or other Star Wars media in general about Ahsoka and Count Dooku. And I feel like seeing Ahsoka as a child and just seeing how she interacts with the world as a Force user who wasn't really aware of that to begin with was pretty cool to see. Just to see her, you know, starting out and like seeing how her abilities are and just how they can impact others was pretty cool to see. And yeah, I really liked the first episode because it definitely showed that and answered that question that I had about what her childhood was like before going to the Jedi Temple.
Right. To me personally, I just found it fascinating that Ahsoka as a baby was able to connect with the Force. We've seen other Force users like Luke, like Anakin, like Leia herself. We've seen the Skywalker family, some of the most powerful Force users, take a while to kind of interact with the Force. Like they've shown the flashes of interacting with the Force, but they fully never materialized those skills. But Ahsoka showed that immediately, like being able to bond with the beast and able to control it and return home safely. I thought that was fascinating. And yeah, I was kind of wondering, we saw in the Mortis arc in the Clone Wars of Ahsoka becoming one with the light side of the Force. Do you think that was always her destiny based on what we saw at such a young age? Or do you think that there's no correlation there?
Honestly, I can see it. I don't think it was entirely planned out, but I definitely think that Ahsoka has always been such a good guy type character, like a very like benevolent character in the Star Wars universe. And seeing how I don't know if there's a connection, but I definitely see what you're alluding to. I think seeing from the Mortis arc how she was able to really like control a beast and become one with the light side of the Force kind of comes back to this arc with her actually like taming a beast and preventing the beast from actually wreaking havoc on the village. With the Force, I think it definitely does um, establish the fact that Ahsoka is a benevolent character overall. I don't know if there's a connection, like I said, but I definitely do think that it adds to that character that Ahsoka has.
And the last question regarding Ahsoka, because her arc lasted 3 episodes, I think the most important thing that we didn't know prior to the series was Ahsoka attended Padme's funeral on Naboo. And I think that that scene was really cool, seeing her there, risking her identity, risking her safety, risking her life, even to come out there and honor her friend. I thought that was really cool. And then we also saw her interact with one of the early Inquisitors. What did you think of that entire final episode of the Tales of the Jedi and how that kind of wrapped up Ahsoka's developmental arc going into what we later saw in Mandalorian or in Rebels?
I think it definitely answers that question that I've always had. Like, how did Ahsoka kind of get into um, that fighting spirit once again after Revenge of the Sith? And like you said, seeing her at Padme's funeral, and meeting with Bail Organa, getting that contact established, and then eventually fighting that Inquisitor definitely explains like how she got back into that fight, how she got back into that resistance to the Empire. I definitely think it answered the question that I had with regards to how she got back into everything once again as a Jedi.
Right, I completely agree on that account. I mean, it kind of is a perfect segue into how she kind of joined the resistance movement as she took time away from the Jedi Order. Um, but moving forward, let's talk about the part that we were all excited to see. We were all excited to see from the start when the premiere trailer for this mini series released. We were all anticipating the development of Count Dooku. We saw a young Count Dooku for the very first time, a time
Yes.
before the Phantom Menace. And I was just so stoked to see that. I'm gonna give you the floor here. What were your entire thoughts about Count Dooku's return as a young Jedi Knight in the animated scene?
It was amazing to see him just kind of back in the Star Wars animated series because I think I really liked how Count Dooku was established in the Clone Wars series, just as how threatening he was and how cunning he was as a warrior and as a force wielder, and seeing him back at the Jedi Temple and seeing how he was kind of interacting with the other Jedi back when he was a Jedi himself. It was really cool to see. Seeing a young Dooku definitely helped fill in some gaps as to how he fell to the dark side and you know, established a relationship with Palpatine and things like that. I really liked what I saw. I was very proud of seeing Count Dooku kind of like fight off other enemies in the Star Wars universe back when he was younger, and that was pretty cool to see.
You know what my biggest takeaway from the Count Dooku arc was and his development? Was that the Jedi are not really the good guys that
Exactly.
everyone thinks they are. Like, their mission is to be the yielders of the light side of the Force and promote peace and prosperity to the galaxy, but really, they are just political pawns, serving at the will of a corrupt government. I mean, that's really what it is, and Count Dooku
Exactly.
saw
Yeah.
that, and he saw that the Jedi, the Order in its entirety, just served the corrupt government and was not actually helping the people that were in need. I think we saw that in the first episode when he was with a Padawan version of Qui-Gon in that village, and he stood up to a senator that was corrupting and ailing his community. We saw that in the second episode when he was a mature Jedi Knight with Mace Windu. He wanted to eliminate the threat within the home world that they were visiting. And then we saw finally he was fed up with it. He had noticed the corruption fully come full circle when the Sith revealed themselves. So I think that Count Dooku brought up a very interesting point. I mean, we've seen it time and time again. We've seen Anakin Skywalker's fall to the dark side. We've seen Count Dooku talk about why he went to the dark side, but actually seeing the bad things that the Jedi Order has actually done and the terrible things that they've been accustomed to doing as a result of the corrupt government, and Count Dooku realizing that made me just think of him more of a good guy making that switch. Obviously, what the way he went about it, you could argue was a bit like not
Yeah.
even controversial. The way he went about it was terrible. Don't get me wrong. Like being a murderous psychopath, I think that is horrible from him. But the ideology of resisting a corrupt government, I think that makes me feel a little bit more empathy towards what Count Dooku, his entire life purpose, because all he wanted to do was really help the common people, and the Jedi were not living up to that standard.
Exactly. And I've been saying this for a while now. I don't think the Jedi are great. I don't think they are. I think the Sith have some backing to their claims as to like the Jedi not being as holy as they are. Of course, the Sith, they have, again, as you mentioned, they have a very bad way of going about how they want to achieve their goals, but they are right in the sense that the Jedi are not the greatest force out there. They do serve a corrupt Senate, as you mentioned, and they don't exactly respect or protect the people. They kind of serve that corrupt Senate and the Chancellor, even, as you mentioned. And Dooku definitely echoes those points that the Sith kind of have, with the Jedi being very oblivious to everything that's going on with the corruption. And he points that out very well. And I really like seeing that progression with that distrust in the Jedi Council in particular as his arc went on.
I think one of my dislikings of Star Wars in the past has been the notion that separatists are always the bad side or
Yeah,
like the bad side of the war. But I think with this Tales of the Jedi series, you really get to see that they actually like people like Count Dooku have a way and a purpose with their ideology and a really valid one and one worth fighting for. I mean, he was the apprentice of Palpatine, and Palpatine was that corrupt chancellor that the Jedi Council was serving, but his goals were not the same as Palpatine's goal. Palpatine gave him the resources to achieve that goal, but in reality, he saw a bigger purpose for that government and essentially restructuring that government that Palpatine's views didn't necessarily align with, and that's why he eventually got betrayed. But I think Dooku's purpose for attending the dark side, or like converting to the dark side, there was a lot of validity to it. That's my entire conclusion from his arc.
exactly, and I agree with you. I think it definitely does articulate the fact that the Jedi are not as great and as holy as they really try to make themselves out to be. And I agree. I agree with the idea that I wish Star Wars will keep on going with this idea and way of making their series and future media where they kind of show the cons of the Jedi Order. You know, I kind of like seeing when uh when Disney kind of releases media that shows that the Jedi aren't as great as they are and that the Sith have some validity to their points as you mentioned. And so I really like how this show articulates and fills up the gaps that we kind of have with Dooku and Ahsoka, and I really liked the Dooku arc because it showed the validity to his points and definitely shows the problems with the Jedi Order.
Yeah, I mean, as far as this series goes, I think that it really does a great job in kind of capturing the or kind of closing the Star Wars The Clone Wars series full circle. I think that like you can finally attach the pieces, but I also think that there's more to discover in terms of Dooku's time with the Jedi. I don't think that this is all that there is to write
Yeah.
in regards to that. And I think there's a lot more they can explore. But I think that's going to do it. Thank you guys for tuning in. Shyam, thank you for coming on. This was a great talk about the Tales of the Jedi, a mini series, but definitely a great one. So, once again, thank you guys for tuning in. And until next time, peace.